Point Fermin Lighthouse had stood for over a century, casting its eerie glow over the rocky cliffs of San Pedro. For decades, locals whispered about the lighthouse's tragic history, the story of Elias Hart, the keeper who had been driven mad by isolation and consumed by darkness. It was said his ghost still lingered in the lighthouse, waiting to ensnare unsuspecting souls. What started as a haunting legend would soon become a terrifying reality for 4 girls from a small Midwestern town, drawn into the curse that haunted the lighthouse. Sarah, Mia, Alexis, and Rachel had grown up in Appleton, Wisconsin, a quiet town nestled along the Fox River. The 4 girls had been inseparable since grade school, bonding over dreams of leaving their small-town life behind. For them, Appleton was a cage, picturesque but too small, too safe, and too predictable. Their friendship had been forged in those long, quiet summers spent by the lakes, dreaming of the world beyond the Midwest. As graduation approached, each girl was headed in a different direction for college. Sarah to Minnesota, Mia to Colorado, Alexis to New York, and Rachel to Madison. This summer trip to California was their last hurrah before stepping into adulthood. San Pedro, with its coastal beauty, felt like the perfect escape, a taste of freedom and adventure before real life began. They rented a small beach house near Cabrillo Beach, eager to soak in the California sun. It wasn't long before they met Nate, Leo, and Chris, a group of local boys who introduced them to the hidden gems of San Pedro. Nights spent at beach bonfires turned into summer romances, with Sarah and Nate forming a strong connection over their shared love of history and the mysteries of the sea. But it was during one of these bonfire nights that Nate introduced them to a darker part of San Pedro's history, the legend of Elias Hart. As the fire crackled and the waves lapped at the shore, Nate began to speak, his voice low and serious, setting the tone for the tale. "You guys ever heard about Point Fermin Lighthouse?" he asked, glancing around at the girls, a shadow crossing his face. When they shook their heads, intrigued, he continued, leaning in closer. "Well, back in the late 1800s, there was a man named Elias Hart, the lighthouse keeper. He grew up around the sea, fascinated by it, like a lot of kids around here. His father was the keeper before him, and when Elias took over, everyone thought he'd be just as reliable. But Elias wasn't like his father. He had problems, and the more time he spent alone in that lighthouse, the more those problems grew." Nate poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks flying into the air as he spoke, his eyes focused on the flames. Elias became obsessed with the idea that the lighthouse was haunted by the spirits of drowned sailors. He started hearing voices, seeing things. The townspeople thought he was going mad, but no one really did anything about it. At least not until one night when he tricked a group of girls into going up there. The girls around the fire exchanged nervous glances, captivated by the story but growing uneasy. He told them stories about hidden treasures and secret coves. Nate continued. But when they followed him to the lighthouse, he locked them inside. They say he stood there, listening to them scream, banging on the walls, begging to be let out. He didn't care. He wanted to prove something, to feel powerful. Eventually, he let them go, but after that night, he wasn't the same, and neither were they. "What happened to the girls?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nate shrugged, his expression darkening. "Some say they were never the same. Others say they left town and never came back. But Elias, he spiraled. He started believing he could talk to the dead, especially the spirits of those sailors he thought were trapped in the lighthouse. He'd walk the cliffs at night, talking to the mist, convinced they were speaking to him." Alexis shuddered, pulling her hoodie tighter around her. "That's so creepy." Nate nodded. "Yeah, and it gets worse. Eventually, Elias disappeared. No one knows exactly what happened to him, but after that, young women started going missing near the lighthouse. Some locals believe his spirit is still out there, trapped in the mist, luring people, especially girls, to their deaths. It's said that on stormy nights, you can see figures walking the cliffs, calling for help, only to vanish when you get close." Leo, who had been quiet for most of the story, chimed in. "Some people say the lighthouse is cursed, that anyone who goes there gets trapped in the same madness Elias did. Sarah leaned in, intrigued but also nervous. Has anyone been inside the lighthouse recently? Nate shook his head. It's been locked up for years. People stay away from it. But there are always stories. Of lights flickering on in the middle of the night. Of strange noises coming from inside. The fire crackled, filling the silence as the group sat, contemplating the legend. Despite the dark tale, Sarah's curiosity was piqued. She'd always loved ghost stories and mysteries, and now she was hooked. After hearing Nate's story, Sarah couldn't get the lighthouse out of her mind. She became obsessed with the idea of visiting it, convinced that there was more to the legend. While the others enjoyed the beaches and sunny days, Sarah spent her time reading up on Point Fermin's history and Elias Hart's disappearance. I'm going to check it out, Sarah announced one afternoon while they were lounging in the beach house. The others, lounging lazily on the porch, looked up at her in surprise. Check out what? Mia asked, already sensing trouble. The lighthouse, Sarah said, her voice tinged with excitement. I've been doing some research, and I think it's worth a visit. The mood in the room shifted as her friends exchanged uneasy glances. Rachel, the most cautious of the group, spoke up first. Are you serious? After everything Nate said, you still want to go there? She asked, her brows furrowed in concern. It's just a story, Ratch, Sarah replied, brushing off the warning. I want to see it for myself. Mia sighed and sat up, her expression serious. Sarah, I get that you're into this stuff, but maybe we should listen to Nate. He said people go missing. Yeah, Alexis added. It's not worth it. We're here to have fun, not get wrapped up in creepy ghost stories. Sarah crossed her arms defiantly. You guys don't have to come if you're scared. But I'm going. Sarah's determination caused a rift in the group. The girls tried to talk her out of it, but she wouldn't listen. Tension grew, and by the time night fell, Sarah had made up her mind. Nate had offered to go with her, but when the others protested, he backed down, not wanting to upset the group further. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Sarah slipped out of the house, leaving a note behind. I'll be back soon. Don't worry. When the girls woke up the next morning and found Sarah gone, panic set in. She actually went, Rachel said, her voice shaky. She actually went by herself. Mia crumpled the note in her hand. We need to find her. The group hurried to find Nate, Leo, and Chris, who were just as shocked when they heard what had happened. Why didn't you stop her? Leo asked Nate, frustrated. I tried, Nate replied, guilt written all over his face. I didn't think she'd go alone. They quickly decided to go after her. As the fog rolled in, thickening around them, the group made their way toward the lighthouse, hearts pounding with dread. Every step closer to the cliffs felt like a step into the unknown. Sarah had already reached the lighthouse by the time the others caught up. Inside, the air was frigid, and the thick, suffocating mist clung to her skin. The faint whispers of Elias Hart echoed through the stone walls, calling her deeper into the lighthouse's maze-like halls. As Sarah wandered, the temperature seemed to drop even further, her breath coming out in shaky gasps. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, urging her up the spiraling stairs. Come to me, they said, cold and eerie. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her, trapping her inside. Outside, Mia, Alexis, Rachel, and the boys reached the lighthouse, their nerves on edge. The door was locked, and as they banged on it, they could hear faint echoes from inside. She's in there, Mia shouted, her voice frantic. We need to get her out. Nate tried the door, then backed up to kick it in. The lighthouse groaned under the impact, but it didn't budge. Inside, Sarah's screams reverberated through the fog. We're not leaving her in there, Nate growled, a mixture of fear and determination on his face. Inside, Sarah fought to keep calm as the ghostly figure of Elias Hart appeared before her. His eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and the whispers surrounded her like a suffocating fog. She backed up against the cold stone wall, trying to scream, but no sound came out. Outside, the group continued their frantic efforts, but the mist seemed to grow thicker, almost alive, swirling around them, pulling them toward the cliffs. Nate, desperate to save Sarah, finally found a way into the lighthouse through a side entrance. He and Mia made a break for it, leaving the others behind as they sprinted up the stairs. They burst into the room just as Elias's spectral form began to close in on Sarah. Nate grabbed her arm, pulling her out of the trance she had been in, and together, they ran for the exit, with Elias's ghostly presence chasing them down the stairs. Outside, the mist engulfed the others, their screams lost in the fog as they were pulled into Elias's cursed grasp. Rachel and Alexis vanished without a trace, their voices fading into the night. Mia and Nate managed to drag Sarah out just before the door slammed shut behind them. As they stumbled away from the lighthouse, gasping for breath, Sarah looked back one last time, her heart heavy with guilt and fear. The others were gone, trapped in the fog, lost forever in the madness of Elias Hart. The mist is not merely a weather phenomenon. It serves as a conduit for Elias's spirit, an extension of his torment and rage. As he isolated himself in the lighthouse, his sorrow and anger permeated the air around him, coalescing into a thick, creeping fog that blankets the cliffs. This mist has a supernatural quality, enhancing the eerie atmosphere of the lighthouse and the surrounding area. The lighthouse's light flickered ominously, a haunting reminder of the curse that would live on.